We begin today's show looking at the new film Argentina 1985, about the trial of the Juntas, the civilian court that prosecuted Argentina's former military leaders for brutal crimes committed during the U.S.-backed right-wing military dictatorship from 1976 to 83. The film is based in part on the story of Julio Stracero and Luis Moreno Ocampo, who prosecuted the Argentine generals. Ocampo later became the first prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. He'll join us later in the show. Argentina 1985 has been shortlisted for an Oscar and just won a Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture in a non-English language. This is a part of the film director Santiago Mitre's acceptance speech at the Golden Globes.
I want to share this for all the people who, since the dictatorship, have been fighting to build a better democracy in Argentina, and they keep on fighting. And well, I think democracy is something that we need to, we need to keep on fighting for.
Santiago Mitre, director of Argentina 1985. The film was also just awarded the NBR Freedom of Expression Award from the National Board of Review. Other winners of the awards included the famed director Steven Spielberg and the film Top Gun: Maverick. In a moment, we'll be joined by Santiago Mitre. But first, let's turn to the trailer of Argentina 1985.
You will be the prosecutor in the most important trial in Argentine history.
I was abducted from my home. They kept me a prisoner for months.
Since the Nuremberg trials,
The responsibility of command lies with the Juntas. We must prove they knew about it.
no country has dared to prosecute a dictatorship.
This is our opportunity.
Be careful, Julio. Be careful.
Until Argentina, 1985.
You're sending Videla to jail?
All of those responsible. There's little time. You won't pull this alone. How many trials have you worked?
None.
90% of the judiciary staff does not want to get involved.
99%. I think we need to look elsewhere.
Where? Kids?
Yes.
If the seniors won't do it,
then we bring the juniors in.
Inspired by a true story.
We need to prove it was a systematic plan, that it was across the country, during the governments of all the commanders. They disappeared people everywhere. They are responsible.
This is about what the country needs. This fall.
What are you afraid of?
Everything. Of this being a trap, of something happening to any of you.
True courage.
They broke into our home, and the trial is in an hour.
Cannot be intimidated.
Your Honor, all I want to know is if my daughter is dead or alive.
Slowly, so that we wouldn't notice, the machinery of horror unleashed its inequity over the unaware and the innocent. History was not made by guys like me.
That's the trailer for Argentina 1985. Well, on Thursday, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I spoke to the film's director, Santiago Mitre, just after he had won the Golden Globe. I began by asking him what it means at an international level for Argentina 1985 to win that award on the way to the Oscars.
Well, it was amazing and a huge honor, of course. The Golden Globe Award and the honor of being shortlisted in the Oscar amplifies the reach out of the film, which is an incredible thing. Not only because it means that many people across the globe are going to watch it, but because these people, especially young generations, who are the ones we are trying to reach the most, like the movie does itself, will be able to have conversations about the impact of the film, about its relevance, about the situation of democracy, and about the fragility of democracy nowadays, which I think it's one of the things that we need to care about a lot.
Santiago Mitre, you were yourself just a young boy when this trial was taking place in 1985. Explain why you wanted to make a film on it, how you decided to do that, and then how you went about conducting the research. This was one of the most significant events in Argentina's political history.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of admiration of the trial for the trial. It's a major event because of the context it was done. It was done only 1 year after the dictatorship ended, and the militaries were still very powerful and very frightening. All the region was still governed by military dictatorships. So the decision of the government to do this trial was very brave and very important, and it founded the basis of the new democracy. The prosecutors, the judges were brave on doing this because it was something risky. We didn't know where it was going to end. And among all the witnesses who survived to the concentration camps, and the families that they fight and try to bring truth during the dictatorship and try to ask for where their relatives were, and sat down and gave testimony while most of the people who run the repressive system was still free. Well, I think the trial had so many layers and so many things worthy of being told nowadays. To the Argentinian audiences who were starting to forget about this event, and to the audiences of the world who could be interested on the subjects that the film could bring. Justice, democracy is something that one of the topics that I think we need to be discussing the most nowadays. Well, because of what's happening all over the world. The war in Ukraine, what just happened 1 week before in Brazil with the attempt of coup d'etat to Lula. Well, the January 6th here. So many places where too many anti-democratic speeches are growing all over the world.
And Santiago Mitre, you, for people who don't know, the history of this period, the period of these successive military juntas from 1976 to 1983, and what exactly happened during this so-called dirty war, could you just give us some background of what was happening then?
Yeah, well, it was part of the late Cold War, let's say. The Argentina had 100 years of history of alternation between one democratic government who would not be ended to a military government. This military government was the most terrible one that happened in history, because it shot, killed, and disappeared as a system to all the citizens who were against them. Politically, or being suspected of being against them. They disappeared over 3,000 people during those years, and killed some more. Well, it was an awful dictatorship and an awful moment to live in that country, and very frightening.
Santiago, you have said, I'm convinced of fiction's capacity to transmit reality. You decided to make this not a documentary, though you did use verbatim the testimony of the victims, the heart-rending, utterly painful testimony of the victims at the trial. But you, for example, Ricardo Darín, one of the most famous Argentine actors, plays Julio Stracera, becomes him in a sense, even though they don't actually look alike. Talk about that choice to make this dramatic feature film.
I believe that fiction is probably the best vehicle to tell the truth. And I did a very long research. For many years, I tried to speak to most of the people who did the trial. or who participated in the trial, journalists who were covering the trial for newspapers, witnesses, families of witnesses, all the prosecutorial team, Luis Moreno Campo itself, the judges, people from the government. I read everything. The testimonies could not. I don't know why. I think it was a thing that I had from my ethics as a filmmaker. I couldn't change a word from what was said during the hearings. The importance that this film transmitted so much truth, I think it was one of my goals. So luckily we were able to shoot in the real courtroom where the trial happened. For so many years when we wanted to watch images of the trial of the Juntas, we were not being able to watch the faces of the people who were giving testimony. And for me, the possibility of recreating this gave me that. Like, okay, we can see the faces and we can try to imagine the pain, the anger, what they were feeling at the moment they were giving testimony.
And Santiago, at the time, do you remember what was, or from what you've heard, obviously, as you said, you were a child when the trials actually occurred and your mother was involved in justice, so obviously you were more familiar with it than most. What was the impact that this trial had, the trial which was publicly accessible? And of course, there was a large public that was there present at the trial. What was the impact on society at large, people who knew very little of what had been happening? What was the response?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the President Alfonsín won because he said he wanted to do the trial, but he promised something and then he did it, which was something that not many politicians do. But at the same time, society were afraid of the trial, in a way. They wanted to try, but they were afraid. They were afraid that a coup d'etat could happen. So it was like a tense situation. It was a big box of amplification, this trial, that made the people conscious of what they have done and about how important it was that we all as a society fight for a democracy. Actually, some months after the trial ended, some rebellions in military cuarteles, I don't know the word in English, like forts or military places all over the country started, and the people massively went out to the streets to protect this democracy.
Tell us, Santiago, about the extras in this film. I mean, you use the verbatim testimony, but of course, actors and actresses of the victims. In one of your showings here in New York, you talked in the Q&A about the woman who was forced to give birth alone. Tell us her story and the reaction of the extras behind.
Yeah, well, it's one of the probably more the testimonies that has more pain in it. It's terrible. It was a physician who was called Adriana Calvo de la Borde who was forced to give birth handcuffed, se dice, con las manos atrás, handcuffed in the back of a police car, and they didn't let her grab his daughter who was just born. Well, and we were doing that testimony. For me, it was one of the main testimonies during a sequence, and I worked a lot with the actress to get the right tone, similar to the real Adriana, but with her own deepness, and we cut her hair, with her clothes were exactly the same because we were mixing this footage with our footage, with the original footage from the trial. And we did a scene like, we were all crying because of being there, listening to that testimony in the same courtroom. It was like, super powerful. And in the first takes, since the first takes, we were all crying. It was impossible not to cry. But then cinema, it's difficult, and sometimes directors we get too obsessed with silly stuff, and we were repeating the scene many times and doing different angles. And there was one person in the audience that was crying since the first shot, and kept on crying after the midday, and we keep shooting, and he was keep on trying, and I didn't understand what was going on with this man. So at some point we did a pause, and the actress went out the set, and this man approached her and told her he used to study with a real Adriana Calvo de la Borde in the university, and he thanked her for letting him watch her or see her friend again. Of course, the actress started to cry again, like massively, and she told me, and I was this film is going to be very intense, and I was crying again too. And during the film, we had like many situations like that, because it's very difficult that someone in my country does not have a relation to someone or who suffered one of these horrors that this dictatorship did to the country.
Santiago, there's a moment in the film, in the courtroom, where the prosecutors go up to the mothers of the disappeared who are there with their famous white kerchiefs, and they've been told by the judge, by the defense team for the generals, that these women must take off their kerchiefs because they're seen as banners. Everyone knows what they mean. Very touching moment. Can you talk about the role of the grassroots movements, these women who marched in the Plaza de Mayo week after week to dramatize the stories of the disappeared, their children, their grandchildren, and the Truth Commission of Argentina?
Yes, the Madres de Plaza de Mayo were one of the main institutions and one of the true heroes of the fighting for democracy during the dictatorship. They risked themselves fighting and asking for where their children were. Also, the families of the kidnapped were. But the mothers and the abuelas, the grandmothers, they keep doing an enormous social work in terms of memory, but with a huge impact in the present. Just 10 days ago, they could rescue one boy who was kidnapped during the dictatorship, and they find his identity, and he could recover his identity and understand who his father were. And it's the 150 case or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. So and there's many babies that were born during the kidnaps, and they were during the kidnaps of their father, and then they were kidnapped by fake families and related to the military sometimes, or even militaries, and it's a fight that the abuelas keep on doing massively. So we are. I mean, I love them so much, and I think they are such an important emblema for our country.
And Santiago Mitre, finally, what do you hope audiences around the world will learn from this film?
That you never have to take democracy for granted, and with justice is the best way to consolidate democracy, and we all as citizens would need to get involved. It's not necessarily to fight, but at least to discuss and to see that there's a problem growing all over the world. I mean, for me, that I do political films, one of the best things that can happen with a film. I think it's like that people, after watching the film, they don't discuss only the film, that they try to watch and they try to watch and try to think about the problems on their own societies.